I had heard about this dinner. I'd heard about it last year. It's something that, from what I gathered, he could be a trade piece because of what's gone on in Dallas. I don't want Warriors fans to take this as I suddenly now think their management is going to go after Klay Thompson at this deadline, but I could potentially see him getting like a farewell type year down the line if everything breaks right.
For Islands and Lathrop, let's welcome in Anthony Slater, ESPN, covers the Golden State Warriors. And let's start with your story today. I got to tell you, it was fascinating. And for the listeners that haven't heard, clearly, you talked to Curry and Draymond, and Klay Thompson was talked to. The Dallas Mavericks coming in here a week from now. Curry expressing, a lot of nostalgia. I'm going to ask it this way. What do you make of the story that you wrote? Like, what all the pieces mean?
Yeah. Look, you mentioned it. This is a timing-wise because they're coming in on Christmas. That's why we're doing it. That's why we did the story. That is the setup to it. It's not like Draymond and Steph tapped on my shoulder and said, hey, I want to reminisce about Klay Thompson.
Right.
I had heard about this dinner. I'd heard about it last year. It's something that, from what I gathered, meant a lot to them as like kind of the next step in acceptance of this breakup that's, as we talked about in the story, as we all know, right, especially being around it on a day-to-day basis, was frosty. It was, unceremonious, used the term, whatever. So, in the lead up to this story, I decided I wanted to sit down with both of them. Tim McMahon, who's on the story with me, talked to Klay out in Dallas. And, it was about the breakup, the nostalgia, also the current moment of Klay, which I know, Warriors fans are a little less interested in the Dallas situation, but that's within there. It's very interesting. He could be a trade piece because of what's gone on in Dallas. And then obviously, to me, the natural question that we also wanted to ask is like, could it be a Dwyane Wade type situation? Steph referred to it as Scottie Pippen, right? That's the name he brought up to me as, you don't want it to be as contentious and scarred as it is with Scottie Pippen. And I thought about the name Dwyane Wade because y'all remember him, him and Pat Riley and that breakup, and then he goes to the Bulls and the Cavs. He did end in Miami. And I think the idea, and I don't want Warriors fans to take this as I suddenly now think their management is going to go, after Klay Thompson at this deadline. But I could potentially see him getting like a farewell type year down the line if everything breaks right. But I know right now at 13 and 14, that's not necessarily what Warriors fans are thinking about.
Yeah. Man, Slates, it's just interesting reading this piece, and it got me to thinking and just remembering the good old days when Klay was in Fuego. But if I were to ask you, Slates, have the Warriors really replaced Klay Thompson to this offense when he was at his highest powers? How would you answer that?
No, but have they replaced a Hall of Famer, maybe the greatest like single 3-and-D weapon in NBA history? And you're talking prime Klay Thompson, right? You're
yes,
not
sir.
talking about 2022. No, but I don't know how you do. Buddy Hield was an attempt at it, right? He's the off-ball movement shooter. But Klay Thompson used to guard Damian Lillard and James Harden in the playoffs for 38 minutes a game. He was a big two guard who, that was probably the most underrated aspect of what he did in those dynasty days. He was their hound on the perimeter. And then he'd get switched on to Kevin Love in the finals in the post and stand him up too. So, the simple answer to your question is no, they have not replaced prime Klay Thompson. But how do they replace prime Klay Thompson?
You've covered a lot of NBA season. There's ebbs and flows to all of them. Are you getting the sense that, I know that Kuminga dates a month from now. Do you get the sense the Warriors feel like they're at a crossroads right here for the next month?
Yeah, because they need to make decisions on their future between the dates of January 15th and February 5th. And, I would have looped the last few games into it, but they had this 20-game stretch that they're now 0-2 in, where they're coming home for, I think it's 14-20 at home now. After this road game tonight, I believe it's 13 in the next 17. It's spaced out. They can, part of their 13 and 14 was the schedule and the road heaviness and all the back-to-backs. Well, they're not going to have that going forward. So they need to make some movement. They need to prove to not only fan base themselves, management who is going to make trade decisions that this is a core worth throwing some chips in, because if we get to the deadline and start to think about how they can get something done that maybe seems unlikely at this moment, that is if they decide to put future first round picks into the pot. And I think they're only going to do that, particularly the post Steph era year picks if they believe this core is worth it. And you know, like pushing in, like it's reasonable to think this team is one piece away from fringe contention, and I think we'll know in the next month. They'll know in the next month how real that is, and you know, really all these home games coming up.
Yeah, man, Anthony, I told Steiny every day I bid hook, line, and sinker last year on the 23-8 and all the metrics that changed defensively. And I look at this roster now, and I'm disappointed. But when I look at it man for man, okay, Dre, you need to fix the turnovers. You are what you are. But in Steph's in fuego. But Slater, I'm fascinated with this. I tell Steiny and the listeners, Jimmy Butler, to me, Slater, can do more. Are they walking on eggshells to even approach him and ask him to do more offensively? Or do you think he might buck back or get upset with the notion that, you know, there's some people out here that think you could do more offensively?
Jimmy's extremely honest, and every time it's mentioned, hey, go score more, he's just continues to say, I'll do the right basketball play every time. I'm going to make the pass. I'm going to, you know, and honestly, if you look at the 23-8 last year, his stats are pretty static from what they are right now. It's not like he was just like a 32-point per game scorer in the 23-8. What happened in the 23-8 last year? He was probably a little bit more energized, but, you know, every veteran was when they were sprinting to the finish line. Steph was also more available. He had this incredible surge during that 23-8. You remember that road trip in Orlando, 50, then Brooklyn 40, and sure, you can say the last two games he's had those like huge moments and they've lost, but if you look over why they're 13-14, remember the illness early in the season that threw them off track when he missed 3 games and then he didn't play well in a few others. Then he has 5 games missed because of the quad. Al Horford, their big free agent signing, has basically been missing in action. There's a lot of reasons to why they're not replicating 23-8. And sure, like some more verve from Jimmy Butler as a scorer could help and probably needs to happen. And as they've talked about, they need to put him in better positions. And, you know, I sat down with them in New Orleans, you know, whatever, it was a month ago, and he talked about maybe tailoring the offense a little bit more to his isolation-heavy game when Steph is off the court. So maybe there's some strategic tweaks. But also 23-8 there was a lot of reasons for it that don't necessarily apply to now, in my opinion.
I feel like setting up the question with like a minute, but I won't. What's going to happen? What's going to happen with Steve Kerr? I just find it fascinating where he's at. Not under contract next year. He's linked to Butler, and he's linked to Curry and Draymond. They have another year. How's this end, do you think?
Yeah, you know, look, I did a sit down with him before the season, and Steph, I wrote a story, you know, and Steph within that voice that, like, he wants it to be Steve till the finish line, but Steve purposely announced it that he wasn't even seeking a contract extension. It wasn't, hey, maybe they'll get something done, but it was like, no, I want, it's a wait and see approach, which tells you that he's, you know, thinking about potentially other options. But I will say within that, he made it clear he's not like looking at the Spurs right now or another NBA team being like, let me jump ship to something else. It seems like it's going to be either stay because the situation still, you know, is appealing to him and to everybody else making the decision. If he's mentioned Joe Lacob, Mike Dunleavy, Steph, Draymond, if they all decide, hey, yeah, let's run it back. Steve Kerr's the coach, let's do it. And I think that depends on what happens the rest of the season. Or he definitely opened the door to the possibility of, if it just doesn't feel right, they will gracefully part ways, right? I think that's the major thing here. That is the theme of my Klay Thompson story today, right? Our Klay Thompson story, which was there is regret about how one of the pillars of the dynasty ended, and Steve has made it clear he wants it to be, you know, graceful, whatever it is. So to answer your question, it's a wait and see, because if 13-14 becomes 40-42 and a play-in exit, like, I could see that going a lot differently than if they make a surge and they're a 5-6 seed and they win a round and they go, hey, let's run it back.
Right.
Man, Slate, you've covered this team for a while. You've seen a lot, the Dre Jordan Poole fiasco and everything, you know, that went down with that. So I guess before I ask you, the word I'm looking for to me is odd. But what did you make of the Joe Lacob email and the response and, you know, the attention has gotten since then? Because the more I think about it, I'm like, Joe's been quiet, but Anthony, he was trying to tell us something. Your thoughts just on the email and it getting out?
You guys know Joe, right? You communicate with Joe.
Yeah.
Like, it could that have easily just been a text message to either of you?
Yeah.
Now the difference is you wouldn't. I assume you wouldn't screenshot it and tweet it out or whatever and be like, hey, look what Joe Lacob said after the Portland game last night.
Right.
Every member of the Warriors, particularly the pillar members, have some real opinions about what's going wrong, who's at fault, this, that. It's clear. I don't believe Joe Lacob thought that was going to be sent to the public. Right. It was. But, like, are those quick little thoughts, like, are you like, wow, that's what Joe thinks about the fact that they're 13-14? No. I mean, we all know. If you're specifically, we're getting into the Kuminga, like, aspect of it all, like, what were we reporting all summer? What have we've been reporting for years? I mean, like, the dynamics at play are very obvious, in my opinion, and why we're at year 5 of that, and then, 2 steps back. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but, like, yeah, of course, like, those are Joe's thoughts. I was just surprised that it popped out into the world.
Yeah.